I knew that Bitcoin could help people and it had changed my life. The thing that stands out for me about Bitcoin is truth. It is the ultimate truth. To go along with that would be fairness. Bitcoin is for everybody, even our enemies.
The Bitcoin network is the people, and the people are also the nodes. We're all one. We're all nodes that are a part of something bigger. Just sharing the good news about what we've learned. We're sending this ripple effect out, and it's trickling down into society and into the world. And
Bitcoin allows me to live with a lower time preference. It allows me to think about what is important in my life.
Bitcoiners are not people that really care about money. We actually don't want to worry about money at all. We want to worry about fulfilling our soul's purpose and creating value. And that's why we like Bitcoin, because it allows us to not worry about money. It allows us to just store our value and then not worry about it anymore. Today on The Signal, I'm joined by Conor McCardle, the host of Something About Bitcoin, a podcast that dives deep into how Bitcoin is changing lives and shifting perspectives. He's passionate about helping people see beyond the surface and into the deeper implications of fiat and freedom. Conor, it's really great to have you here today.
Thanks, Dr. Satoshi. It's great to be here. And we were just saying there was only a couple of months ago that I first discovered your content on Instagram, and it was the first time that I heard somebody speaking about Bitcoin the way that I thought about it. And me, when I get into the space, it was very much a financial thing. And the people that I was speaking to were speaking about Bitcoin in terms of it being a financial tool. So I was almost afraid to speak about it in terms of spirituality and the way that I was actually thinking about it. So it's great to be on your show.
Yeah, I'm really glad that my material is resonating with you. And I just want to thank you for getting me started on this podcast journey, because you invited me onto your podcast, and I don't think I would have started my podcast if you hadn't got me started and got me over that hump. So thank you very much. And
Wow,
it's really cool.
it's an honor, yeah. It's like that ripple effect, isn't it? When, like, for me, starting my podcast, I didn't set out to be a Bitcoin podcaster. I just had this thing inside me where I knew that Bitcoin could help people and it had changed my life, and I wanted to share that with the world. And so the only way I could think of doing that was by setting up a podcast, and it was against my own nature. It was like there was a lot of fear there and stuff, and I just had to do it. It was one of those things of, could I wait to make this perfect, or will I just do it and then try and make it better as I go along? And it's funny that I just did that, and now we're having this conversation. I had you on my podcast, and I was saying that some of the guests that you've had on your own show now, like, you're talking about books and talking about concepts on there, and I'm like, oh, I need to write this down. I need to follow this person. It's like you're putting that energy out into the world, and now it's coming back for me. And I'm getting so much out of my own podcast, just chatting to people, and now I'm getting so much out of your podcast and the people that you're chatting to, and then obviously I'll go follow those, and maybe they've got their own podcast. It just spreads out. It's just sending that energy out into the world, isn't it?
Yeah, that ripple effect is pretty incredible, and it's incredible to be a part of it. And yeah, you started your podcast, and you had me on, and then now I'm starting my podcast, and people are telling me that I'm touching them, and then they're starting podcast, and it's that whole node effect where that's the Bitcoin network in action. The Bitcoin network is not just the computer code and the monetary transactions. The Bitcoin network is the people, and the people are also the nodes, and we're sending this ripple effect out, and it's trickling down into society and into the world. And it's incredible to be a part of this journey with people like you, and really with the rest of the world, and just sharing the good news about what we've learned.
Yeah, man, it's amazing. And I like the way you talk about it in terms of us being nodes, because when I started, I just wanted to talk about Bitcoin, and I wanted to be able to connect to other Bitcoiners and to give my friends and family the opportunity to hear two Bitcoiners speaking. Because up until that moment, I was just this crazy person that was talking about Bitcoin at them all the time. And it was more, I needed a release so I could give my wife some respite from me constantly talking about Bitcoin. So I thought I need to speak about Bitcoin. So who better speak about Bitcoin with than other Bitcoiners? So I thought a podcast would be a good idea. And I didn't really know what the podcast was going to be about. And initially I thought it's just going to be about Bitcoin. But as I go along, I think it's not really about Bitcoin. It's more about Bitcoiners. And I want to connect with people that are using Bitcoin as an asset, a store of value, and also people that are living on a Bitcoin standard, using it as money, and people that are changing the world and changing their mindset through the use of Bitcoin, you know. And I think what I am now is a node where I'm just reaching out to that network, like you said, and I'm connecting different people, connecting the dots of the different nodes in the network. So it's cool. It's cool to be a part of this world.
Yeah, I love what you say. It's not about Bitcoin, it's about Bitcoiners and what we represent. And there's so many misconceptions about Bitcoin and thus misconceptions about Bitcoiners. So what would you say it is that Bitcoiners represent? What is it that we stand for? What is it that makes you want to connect with them more?
I'd say there's a few different things, but I'd say mostly truth. The
Hmm.
thing that stands out for me about Bitcoin is truth. It is the ultimate truth. And I suppose to go along with that would be fairness. I like the idea that Bitcoin is for everybody, even our enemies. It can't be used against us, and we can't act maliciously and use it against other people, no matter what reason we might find. So it's that fairness aspect, and I don't think there's too many things in the world today, or maybe that have ever existed in the world that are that fairness, that level of fairness, and then truth. People have always been in search of truth, I think, and we've all always had these ideas of these tribal ideas, I think, and you see it in politics, and we've probably talked about this before, the idea of left and right, and everybody always thinks that they are the right, they're in the right, they are truthful, and it hasn't always been the case. And I think there's big ideas that I like to think about in terms of spirituality and good and evil, and just loads of different things and the metaphysical and all. And I like to discuss these things, but you never really get to the truth of things because you can't know everything. You can't know. You can have a strong idea, you can have a strong intuition, and you can have a good conversation with somebody and put ideas back and forth and come to a conclusion, but you never really know the truth. And with Bitcoin, we know what that is ultimate truth. And it's kind of funny because I speak to a friend of mine, and he'd be quite spiritual, and he'd be kind of on a spiritual path trying to find God or whatever. And I remember saying to him one time that I thought that maybe Bitcoin could be God or Bitcoin could be the second coming of Jesus. Bitcoin is truth. And if you think of God as the ultimate truth as well, they're interconnected in that sort of way. So fairness and truth, I'd say, is what it sums it up for me.
Yeah, that's a great way to sum it up because that's pretty much the opposite of the current system that we have now, the fiat system. There's almost no truth in the fiat system. It's all just illusions and lies. And that's a key component for people to really understand the importance of Bitcoin is understanding the current system. Because a lot of people just don't understand the current system. But once you see that it's built on just manipulation and there's no firm layer of truth, that's what opens your eyes to Bitcoin and how beautiful it is to have that truth and fairness
Mm.
too. Yeah, our current system is just not fair at all. It's just so manipulated and so stacked in the favor of the elites. And if you just have a system based on truth and fairness, everything will essentially autocorrect. And it's so beautiful to see that there is this option now, and that's what we see. But so many people don't see Bitcoin as that, and that's what me and you are here for, to allow people to see that. Because I don't see how anybody could really be against that or not be for that if they really knew what it really was.
Yeah, definitely. It's we spoke about this before, and it was the idea of why are we able to see this when other people can't see it?
Mm,
And sometimes I get caught up in the idea that I should be doing more to help other people see this.
mm,
It took a really long time for me to understand Bitcoin, especially on this level, and
mm.
it's quite funny because I think when I came to Bitcoin, I already had somewhat I had a low time preference. So the way I came to Bitcoin was through the FIRE movement, if you've ever heard of that. So
Yeah.
the FIRE movement was financial independence and retire
Hmm.
early. And the path that they were taking was by using index funds and the S&P 500, and that's the vehicle they were using to create wealth. And through learning about that, I realized that if I didn't consume today, and if I had some discipline, I could put my money in a place where it would grow. Maybe only at that time, maybe between 7 and 15%, but that was enough. Given a long enough time period, I was probably only 20, late 20s at the time. So I was thinking 30, 35 years in the future. And if I could just put these small amounts of money away for a long enough period of time and not consume in the present moment, that would grow and eventually I would be able to retire early and I would have an abundance. So it was through learning about that I actually learned about having a low time preference. And then eventually I came to find Bitcoin because the people that were speaking about the FIRE movement, they were saying that some big investors were now starting to put 1% of their portfolio into Bitcoin. And I was thinking, why would you do that? That's Bitcoin's a scam. It's an
Hmm.
obvious scam. Why would you do that? And that's a conversation that was going on in these groups at that time. And then a friend of mine had said to me just in a conversation, he was like, "Oh, we missed out on Bitcoin. We missed out on Ethereum." And I was like, "What's Ethereum?" And he sparked my interest. I was like, "What is this other thing that you're putting in the same conversation as Bitcoin?" And so I looked at it, and then I ended up looking at Bitcoin, and eventually I ended up going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. But I already had that low time preference mindset, and part of it actually came from a book that I read called Minimalism: Living a Meaningful Life. And it was these guys wrote this book. They had big corporate jobs and they had all the things that they wanted, all the material things, and they weren't happy. And they realized that when they started getting rid of their stuff, they started to become happier. So I still had that sort of mindset when I came to Bitcoin. And I'd say I'd already started off on a spiritual path because I would say I've had two spiritual experiences and I had them prior to coming to Bitcoin. So I had this, I was living almost, I was trying to live a spiritual way of life and I had that low time preference. But the two things, I just had them. I didn't have Bitcoin, and Bitcoin was like it was like the Holy Trinity. It was like this thing that was going to allow me to even have a lower time preference, get to my desired place quicker, and then little did I know it would actually end up making me think about the world, think of more in spiritual terms and in terms of energy. And it's like Bitcoin is just energy. That's all that it is. And it's funny that it's this thing that a lot of people can't comprehend because it's not a physical thing, but it's something that you can hold in your hand. It's a strange thing, and trying to explain that to people is very difficult. Sorry, what was your question?
I forgot what the question was, but I love your answer. I love what the things you're bringing up, the fire movement. I definitely was aligned with that as well. And then
Yeah.
it matches up very well with the Bitcoiner mindset, actually, in terms of the low preference and saving. And
Yeah, I think
that's, yeah.
I think that's something that I think about a lot is because a lot of people do come to Bitcoin for the get rich quick, and it's that kind of mindset, and then eventually their time preference starts to lower. And for me, I kind of think it was the other way around. So I had the low time preference, and then I found Bitcoin, and I also had started off down a spiritual path, and then it was like Bitcoin just came along, and I think it kind of took me away from the life that I was living. So when I say I was on a spiritual path, I just I'd set out to live my life by a set of spiritual principles, and part of that was humility. And so whenever I found Bitcoin, I was living this life, and I had a I would say I had a dependence on a power, a higher power, something bigger than me. I had this like ego death. At one point I thought I was the center of the universe. And then I realized that maybe my life would improve if I put my dependence on something outside of myself. And that's what I'd done. And so when I found Bitcoin and I started to study it, and the things that I thought were going to happen with Bitcoin started to happen, it's very hard to remain humble and stay in that sort of that life that I was living while Bitcoin's doing its thing. And then obviously it's the life that I was living. Money wasn't a big part of it. It was trying to live a humble life and just live a simple life. And charity was a big part of it. And when I learned about money, there was this idea that you give tithes, you give money to charity, and you will get it back tenfold. So that's the kind of life I was living. And a lot of my friends who were quite spiritual, and I was learning a lot from those people. It's very hard for me to then say to them, people, I found this thing that's Bitcoin, it's Bitcoin, and to say the number's going to go up forever. It didn't really align with the life that I was living. I couldn't speak about it with the people that I was friendly with at the time. And so eventually studying Bitcoin, it was like, oh, this actually could fix the broken money system. This could fix the problem with the war machine. This could help people in poor nations. This is actually something that people are using to live, to create a life with, that they otherwise wouldn't have. So it's a funny thing that I battled with that in the beginning, the spiritual aspect, and now Bitcoin's brought me back to that. And it's for me, it's deeply rooted in this idea of I've heard you speak about the fourth turning and stuff before, and Bitcoin is center to all of that stuff for me. Bitcoin allows me to live with a lower time preference. It allows me to think about what is important in my life, think about my family, and think about the person that I want to be. And that's how the podcast came about as well, was because I wanted to move more into the world of Bitcoin and not be in that fiat world. And now I just want to create value. I think that's something that I've learned from Bitcoin is I just want to create value somewhere. I don't know how I'm going to do that yet or where I'm going to do it exactly, but the idea of just going out and working to get this toy money that's made of paper so that I could maybe in the future do something with it. It's ridiculous to me. I want to just create value. It's funny because even if all the Bitcoin was gone and somehow we didn't have access to our Bitcoin, Bitcoin has changed me. And I know Bitcoin has changed you. And I think
Mhm.
once we get to a certain point of Bitcoinization, when enough people are changed, even if the Bitcoin goes away, enough change has happened
Mhm.
within
Mm.
the consciousness of the universe that we'll never go back to the way it was before. Bitcoin, we don't even need Bitcoin. We don't even need Bitcoin to have a better world. But it's like the key for me. I think about it now in terms of it's the key that gets us there.
Yeah.
A lot to unpack there, but
Yeah. Thank you for those thoughts. I love those thoughts. Resonate deeply with everything that you're saying. And I love how you talk about how you were on a spiritual journey before and then Bitcoin just deepened it, and
yeah,
how people often think of Bitcoin as money. And it is in a sense, but it's actually the opposite of money. It allows you to fix the money issue so that you don't have to worry about money. So Bitcoiners are not people that really care about money. We actually don't want to worry about money at all. And that's why we like Bitcoin, because it allows us to not worry about money. It allows us to just store our value and then not worry about it anymore. And now you're not worried about money. You can focus on what your soul really wants to do. You can focus on creating value. So it really brings meaning back into your life by removing this money issue. And that's what I really want to stress to people that don't understand Bitcoin yet and are lumping it into this money category, or people that are into Bitcoin are too into money. It's actually the opposite. Bitcoiners are not into money. We don't want to have to worry about money. We want to worry about fulfilling our soul's purpose and creating value, like you said. And
yeah,
that's what kind of what you're saying is that Bitcoin changes you. It changes you, and it's not even about the money. So even if the money goes
no,
away, the effects that Bitcoin has on society are going to be so long lasting. I've never heard someone say it like that. So thank you for that thought
yeah,
provoking idea.
yeah. And when you're speaking about money, I remember there was a thing on social media a few years back, and it was if you could change one thing about the world, what would you change? And my answer was always the same, and it was to remove all money because
Hmm.
I seen back then that it was money was this thing that caused so much destruction and chaos. So it was whether you had too much of it or not enough of it, it was always this like divisive thing. And so I just thought that if you could remove the money, then everybody would be fine. But that was a naive kind of thought because I didn't think about the implications of a world with no money or whatever. But in that world, if you were just to take the money away, the world wouldn't work. And now that I've discovered Bitcoin, like you said, for me, Bitcoin is not about money. It's not about having more. It's
Hmm.
when you learn that the current system that we have is a system of extraction and
Hmm.
central banks are printing money to no end as much as they want. They have unlimited access to the money printer. And we understand that when they increase the money supply, the price of everything has to go up because your money in your pocket or your wages or your savings are devalued. Once you understand that, like that's insane. And if everybody could just understand that problem that we have where the money that we have is being devalued. So when we go to work and we spend our time and our energy to get that money, that fiat, that's just being devalued. So our time is being devalued. And sometimes I'd say to people like they don't care about their time, they don't care about their money as such because maybe they have a higher time preference. But things when I say to them like this is time with your kids or time with your wife, what if somebody just took half of that away from you? Somebody is doing that. Somebody is
Hmm.
removing that time. They're coming into your life and they're just cutting the time that you have with your kids in half. They're cutting the time that you have with your wife in half. They're cutting the time that you have with your parents in half because you now have to work more to get the same amount of money. Otherwise, you fall behind. So it's very hard trying to get that problem across to people. But once I learned about that, it wasn't so much that I was interested in the number technology go up or the number go up technology of Bitcoin. It was that it was this life raft that I just had to go to work, mine fiat, and just exchange that into Bitcoin and do absolutely nothing. And even if it didn't continue to appreciate in value, at least I wasn't sinking. I was on that life raft, and I didn't have to worry about. I think everybody has this thing where they feel they're being squeezed and they don't know where it's coming from or what it is. They just know that life is tougher for them than it was for their parents. And I think it's probably the first generation that's had that because it was the money wasn't perfect, but people had the ability to go to work and to save and to pass it to their children, and they could build on that, and they could pass it to their children, and they could build on the money that they had because it wasn't devaluing at such a fast rate, and now it is, and people just feel hopeless, I think. And so Bitcoin gave me hope. It didn't even have to go up. The number didn't have to go up. It just, as long as I was taking my
Mm-hmm.
energy out of this system that was extracting value from me by devaluing my money, if I could take my energy out of that system and put it into this new Bitcoin system, it didn't even have to appreciate. It just had to stay level.
Mm-hmm.
And just by doing that, I got so much more hope because I had hope for the future. I had hope for my kids. I had hope for the world around me, my neighbors. So that's all I had to do was just move it from one system to another system. And it's a beautiful thing.
So you're talking about this connection between money and relating it to moments of your life. And I think that's a great way to break it down because when we talk about debasement and money printing and inflation, we understand it. And once you see it, it's very obvious. But when we talk about all this stuff, I fear that a lot of people that don't understand it, it goes over their head. And even if they understand what we're saying, it doesn't hit them that deep. But what you just said, I think, will allow it to hit deeper. Don't think about it as debasement and don't think about it as money devaluing. Think about it in terms of you having fewer moments with your family. That is a very tangible way to break this down and understand how deep this problem is. Because you might not understand what we're saying about debasement, but you can understand that you have half as much time to spend with your kids or your wife. And that's what we're talking about. That's what we really want people to see so that you can realize that you actually have an option. You don't have to be in that system where you're having to spend less time with your family. If you move your money out of the fiat system, you can still make your money in the fiat system, which is what most of us still have to do. But you have the choice to then move that life force that you've earned into Bitcoin, into a different system that's not stealing these moments with your family. And I love how you make that example because I haven't heard someone say it like that. And that was very profound.
Thank you. Just going back to mining fiat, we can still earn a living in the fiat world.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something now it's weighing on me because I do want to, once you truly understand the problem, at the beginning it's, yeah, they're devaluing our money. That's okay. I'll move it into Bitcoin. That's fine. I'll work a bit more. I'll learn a bit more. I'll buy some more Bitcoin, whatever. It's not a big problem. Not really. And especially where I am in Ireland, a lot of the talk is about what the Fed's doing, what America's doing, and there's that distance from me, so it doesn't really affect me as much. Although I know what happens in America and what happens with the Fed dictates what happens all around the world. I know that now. But when I look at the money problem further, and I start to look at the creation of the money system, the creation of central banks, it becomes something that I wrestle with because where I am at the moment, I think it might be because I have a young family, maybe I don't know, but I don't want to have any part of the fiat system at all. Because I heard Kyle on the We Are Satoshi podcast. I think he was talking about a conversation he had with Jeff Booth, maybe, but he was saying that when we hold fiat, we have blood on our hands, and that really resonated with me because that's what I believe. If we take the money away from the state, if you separate money and state, a lot of problems go away, a lot of violence goes away, a lot of war goes away. And so I can tell people move to a Bitcoin standard or start buying some Bitcoin. It's good for you. It's good for your family. It's good for the world. But if I'm still in that old system, this is how I know that this is how I know Bitcoin is. It touches me on a spiritual level. It's because there's a dissonance there.
Mm-hmm.
Because I still feel like I'm using this. It's a tool for destruction. That's what it is. It's a tool for destruction. And I don't want to be I don't want to be like having the fiat mindset. I don't want to be
Mm-hmm.
kind of living in the Bitcoin world, but still have the fiat mindset. If you know what I mean, hard to describe. It's kind of hard to describe. I can't put it into words. But when have to use a bank account, a fiat bank account, something in me is saying, "Why are you doing this? You don't need to do this.
Mm-hmm.
There is a way. There's another way." And I can tell people, Bitcoin is a revolution. We're going to take power away from the governments. We're going to take power away from these institutions. We're all going to move to a Bitcoin standard, and we're going to stand up. And those people that are playing chess with our lives, they're going to lose all their power. I can tell them that and be passionate about that. But then something inside me says, "Are you really doing what you're telling other people to do? And am I doing it 100%? No, I'm not. I'm still in the fiat world." And it started to creep into other areas of my life in terms of the health, which is a big one, and the food. I'm really down the rabbit hole of food, fiat food now at the moment. But going back to work. So in my job, I sometimes I do jobs for bigger companies and I get contracted to do jobs for bigger companies. And the job that I'm on at the moment is it's for a big pharmaceutical company basically. And
Mm.
I didn't know it was a big pharmaceutical company. I'll not say the name, but I didn't know that's who it was until I arrived onto the site and then I seen the signs and stuff. And as soon as I was there, I was like, oh, no, I don't want to contribute to this. I don't want to. And they give us the story that they were creating a vaccine that was going to cure this problem. And I was like, straight away, I was like, that's bullshit. Everybody here believes this and they're doing something
Mm.
great. I know that's probably bullshit. And I just didn't want to be there. But at the same time, I'm still in the fiat world. I have to earn a paycheck for my family. And that's just the position that I'm in. So the longer that I'm there, now it's just a building site and I'm just doing my job, but I still have that thing in me. If I was maybe a bit more practicing what I preach and I was a bit more on a fiat standard and a bit more in the Bitcoin world, maybe I would decide that morally this does not align with me and I wouldn't do this job. I've never had that thought about anything in my life before I understood Bitcoin. So it's making me think about every aspect of my life. And there's still those little touch points where I find myself in a situation or there's something in my life that I'm reflecting on, and I'm like, does this align with Bitcoin? And sometimes it doesn't, but it's just things that I have to deal with. It's like teething problems in this process. But if I was walking onto that building site on the first day and I was saying to one of the guys, I can't work here because I think these people are trying to kill everybody. And he would say, why do you think that? And I said, because I'm a Bitcoiner, obviously. He would think I was crazy. So it's funny that I'm thinking about all the aspects of my life in terms of Bitcoin and do they align to who I am? And Bitcoin is it's my compass. It's my moral compass in some
Mm.
ways. So it's funny that Bitcoin has led me down that path.
Yeah, I resonate deeply with what you're saying because since I've discovered Bitcoin, it's also made me think a lot differently about my job as a doctor in the hospital. And like you, I think all the time about how I'm I basically have blood on my hands by staying in this system because I'm contributing to the system that now I know is not morally aligned. I know that there's a way of living that is more aligned with reality. And with my job in the hospital, I've realized that I'm giving patients this pharmaceutical medication that I've been taught in medical school, which is funded by the pharmaceutical companies, that every ailment requires a pill to get better. And I've realized that that's not actually true. Our bodies are so powerful and they can heal themselves on their own. And there's natural remedies and there's homeopathic remedies and there's what you eat and there's your sleep. All those things matter way more than just giving someone a pill that actually has toxic side effects. And so my whole job is administering pills now and basically doing what these pharmaceutical companies want me to do. And if
Yeah.
you just follow the money, it really shows where basically the source of everything is if you follow the money. And
Yeah.
the money will make everything clear. And when the money is broken like it is, then everything downhill from that becomes broken as well. And that's the beauty of Bitcoin is it's perfect money. So everything that flows downhill is not going to be perfect, but it's not going to be corrupted in the way that it is now with the current system.
Most definitely. Yeah. I love that everything is downstream of money because we do say Bitcoin fixes this and fix the money, fix the world, and it could be very hard for people to maybe to understand the extent of that statement. When you look at things and you truly understand how the world works, like that is so true. I think a lot about what in the world does Bitcoin not fix, and there's very few things that I can find. There's going to be some, like you said, not everything's going to be perfect, but once we fix the money, everything downstream of that improves, and that's why it's so important that me and you are having this conversation and we're speaking about this. It's like maybe a couple of years ago, could you imagine yourself being on a podcast talking about this magic internet money with me? It's like there is something that's going on in this space and
Mm-hmm.
with Bitcoin. You could call it spiritual, call it whatever you want to call it, but there is something that is pushing us in a certain direction and drawing certain people together. And there's nothing, even religion, I don't think does that. Religion doesn't do that because it's something that people can't agree on. There's so many gods in the world, and each person just believes in one less than the other. Bitcoin is the only thing that really brings us all together. And it's such a strange idea because I think that it's in human nature to gravitate towards different tribes and
Mhm.
to find differences and to judge other people. But like when you go to a conference or if you go to a Bitcoin meetup, everybody is aligned with each other because we know that we've come through this journey of self-discovery, not listening to what people told us and putting in the work, proof of work. And when you're in this space for a while, it can feel like everybody understands this and it's such a massive part of our lives and we think it's such a
Mhm.
massive thing in the world. But like it's what, 5% adoption or something? We're like in the
Mhm.
first 5% of this thing. It's actually insane to think that we're so early. I don't know what you think about all that, but do you ever think of
Yeah, yeah,
how early we are?
yeah. We're so I think it's even less than 5%. Like I hear 1% or 2%,
Or
but yeah, it's mind blowing just how early we are because it seems so obvious. And it's a thing with Bitcoiners that once you see it, you think everyone's going to discover what you've discovered tomorrow, and you get really worried and you want to buy as much Bitcoin as you can. I've heard this over and over from many Bitcoiners because once you see it, it really is so obvious, and you're like, once other people discover this, all the Bitcoin's going to be gone, and the price is just going to shoot up, and it's mind blowing that people aren't discovering it
yeah,
because to us it seems so obvious, but and that often frustrates us, and that's partly why we are doing this podcast so we can educate others. But that's actually a beautiful thing about Bitcoin is that people get it when they're ready and when they do the proof of work. So you have to put in the work, otherwise you're not going to get the rewards. And it's
yeah,
not even that much work. It's just a little bit of curiosity and digging in a little bit deeper, and that'll start you down the journey. But you have to put in the work. You can't just have someone tell you, or it's not just going to come to you. You have to put in the work, and
yeah,
that it is a beautiful thing about Bitcoin because it's allowing it to unfold with almost divine timing. Like you wouldn't want it to be adopted more quickly because then there'd be too much chaos in this transition period between fiat and Bitcoin, and the current systems, they would just collapse, and it would actually be almost apocalyptic if it happened too quickly. So it has to be this slow, steady adoption. And I think it's like divine unfolding. Like it's slowly taking off, just more and then more and more, and it's not too fast. It's just a perfect unfolding. And that actually gives me a lot of inner peace because I think, like you, we see it and we want everyone to get it, especially our loved ones, because we want them to benefit from this new technology and we want their lives to get better. But if you sit back and just realize that people are going to get it when they're ready and when they put in the work, then it allows you to not stress so much about trying to help other people.
yeah. I think it's true that everybody gets it at the price they deserve, isn't it? I did get stressed out when I was trying to tell
Yeah.
people about it at the
Yeah.
beginning, but a few great things have happened to me recently
Hmm.
where I'd been around people and just chatting about Bitcoin or the conversation came up and somebody else who'd been in my company before, who I didn't actually know was listening, had said, "Oh, Connor, talk to him. He knows about Bitcoin." And I was
Mm.
like, "How do you know that?" And it was just, I didn't even register with me that I'd been speaking about Bitcoin and they'd picked it up and it had stayed with them. So then when we were in each other's company again, then it came up again and it was like, oh, so when you're doing little things and just speaking about Bitcoin, you're planting seeds, and that's all you
Mhm.
have to do. You don't have to be like shaking your friends saying they're
Mhm.
stealing our money. You don't have to do that. And that's kind of brought me a bit of peace. Is that just do your thing? You know what I mean? Just take action and do whatever we can in the space and try to work for ourselves and work for our family. And I think other people notice it. You don't
Mhm.
have to go out there shouting about things all the
Mhm.
time. They just notice. They say, "Oh, he's not as stressed as what he used to be," and "Oh, he's taking a longer holiday. He never used to take that many weeks on holiday." And the great thing now that actually came from this year, I went to the Bitcoin Ireland conference, and for the
Mhm.
first, I was actually thinking of not going, and I was having a conversation with one of the organizers, and he said, "Don't know, I had my wife and my kids. Said I want to spend the time with them. Maybe I don't want to spend time away with them and go to the conference for 2 or 3 days." And he said, "Take them with you. Sure, Bitcoin's for your kids. That's what it's for." And I was like, "Yeah,
Mhm.
I'll just take them." So I took them, brought them to the conference. My kids are running around going mad, and my wife was there, and she didn't get to see much of the speakers, but we brought home a book, a signed book from a local guy here, and she read it. And I was in the kitchen cooking, and she was reading the book, and all I heard was, "What? no way. And I could hear those moments where she was starting to get it. And she's like, is this true? And now when I, 'cause I don't talk too much about Bitcoin around her, but I'll still complain about the fiat world. And I'm
Mm,
always reading labels of food and talking about even the pharmaceuticals companies and stuff. And now the latest thing now is my kids are ready to go to school and I want to homeschool them. I don't want to put them in
mm,
school system. So I'm always telling her about, I heard this and I read that. But she referenced stuff that she heard that she read in that Bitcoin book. She'll be like, "Oh yeah, you think that because of this," and I'd be like, "How did you remember that?" So it's sinking in. She's starting to become orange pilled, and that's an amazing thing. If there was one person that I could want an orange pill in life, if it was just one person, it would be my wife, because now I feel like we have that foundation. She has enough of an understanding where we can now pass this on to our kids. And I don't want my kids to ever be a part of the fiat world if they don't have to be. When I was young, my parents didn't really teach me about money. I had to
mm.
learn about that by myself. The school system didn't teach me. And when I learned that stuff, I thought I have this knowledge now, I can teach it to my kids and we'll set up a tax wrapper and they can invest in the S&P 500. That's where my mind was. But now it's no, I'm not teaching any of that stuff. And if anybody tries to teach them that stuff, I'm going to get them as far as they possibly can away from them. I'm going to show them Bitcoin. I'm going to show them how I use Bitcoin. And there's things like kids' books about Bitcoin and little teddies that they can have,
Mm.
Satoshi teddies and stuff. And they're going to grow up in a world, a Bitcoin world, and they're going to grow up with hope and they're going to understand the principles and the values of Bitcoin. And that's a great thing. So it's, I wasn't going to go to that conference and then I just went because of that comment from a Bitcoiner. And then it ended up being a great moment in my life. And hopefully it'll be a day that my kids will remember. And now it'll inspire me to take them to more conferences and to go out and experience Bitcoin as a family rather than just me being the crazy Bitcoin dad.
Yeah, I love that story. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, the idea of kids being exposed to the fiat world, it's just a reminder of the world that we live in is it's we're entrenched in the fiat world and we get indoctrinated in the fiat world from the moment we're born. And what Bitcoin represents is basically just shedding all of these fiat illusions. And I think that's one of the most important things about Bitcoin is how we talked about earlier, how it represents truth. It's resonating at this frequency of truth. And once you resonate at that frequency of truth, you start to shed all these false layers and false identities. And when you talk about kids, it makes me think that we've been building up these layers, these false layers, ever since we were born. And so when we get in touch with Bitcoin, we feel so alive because we're finally shedding these layers that we realize they're not really us. They're these fiat creations. And that's what makes us so passionate about Bitcoin because it feels so freeing to be free of these illusions and to be more in touch with your soul and the frequency of truth and the frequency of your soul. And
Yeah,
the idea of protecting your kids from ever building up those layers is very deep. And
yeah,
I love these conversations about Bitcoin families because that's what Bitcoin represents is being able to live in a world where you have more kids and you have more time with them and they grow up to be better people who aren't corrupted by this fiat system. And yeah, so thank you for bringing up that topic. I need to think about that more
yeah.
when I start having kids.
I noticed that before I actually had my kids, I didn't have them, my wife had them. But before we had our kids, there was a trend. We seemed to notice a trend that was happening among, I suppose, just general society where couples were moving in together and then the traditional thing was to buy a house and then to have kids. But what they seemed to be doing was going on holidays and then getting dogs or cats or getting pets.
Mm,
And I used to make this joke that the pets were the new children and that children were the exotic animals that nobody could afford. And I think that whole shift in mentality and people's wants
mm,
and needs, it comes from the fact that young people don't think that they have any chance of buying a house. They don't think
mm,
that having a family is attainable. So they just, it's the consumer mindset. They'll work and they'll take their money and they'll go on a nice holiday. And when they feel that there's a void maybe in their life, they'll get a dog or a cat or something because they don't see that they're able to afford anything more. They're able to afford kids or whatever. It's one of the greatest things. Like no matter what I'll do in my life, no matter what I achieve, no matter what job I have or whatever, the greatest thing that I'll ever be is a dad. And I don't think that without Bitcoin, that would be something that I would be able to say because if I didn't have my Bitcoin there, and this hope for the future, and knowing that what I've stored will grow in value over time, I don't think I would have had the confidence to bring two kids into this world.
Mhm.
And if I didn't have the
Wow.
hope for a better future, I wouldn't have done it, because I used to always say I don't want kids because I can't bring kids into this world. It's a nasty place, and I wouldn't do that. But now I just want to create stuff. I just want to keep having kids. I want to have as many kids as I possibly can, and Bitcoin's allowed me to do that. And I want to create businesses and just be more artistic and be more creative in general. I think I just have a little bit of freedom where I can think, what do I want to do? What do I want to be? Who do I want to be? And it's just it's a small buffer, a small gap, a small bit of breathing space.
Mhm.
That's all humans need. It's just that little
Mhm.
tiny bit of breathing space where they can get out of their head
Mhm.
and start to be human, and to
Mhm.
not be these meat suits that are just being controlled and pushed around. And a lot of people are living a life that they weren't meant to live. They weren't born to live lives like that. And it's just normality for people. Like thousands of years ago, whatever, when we were hunter gatherers, we only worked 4 hours a week. And that was
Mhm.
enough to provide food and shelter for ourselves and for our families. And slowly, as time went along, we've had to put more time and energy into securing a family and securing shelter. And the way it is today, people need two jobs, both parents need to work, and they just accept that as being normal, as a part of life. And it's not normal, it's very abnormal. And you only realize how far from nature we've come when you compare it to the hunter gatherer only
Mhm.
had worked 4 hours. Because people would think hunter gatherers had it so tough, they had to work so hard for their food, and there's probably a lot of danger. But I think the further back you go, the better it probably was, because working 4 hours and then getting to spend the rest of your time with your family,
Mhm.
having those connections, and passing down what you've learned, teaching your children how to hunt, teaching them how to build a
Mhm.
shelter, that
Mhm.
is that's when you're being what you're supposed to be. That's what being human is for me. It's not getting in a car, driving to a job, and then trying to figure out where can I put my money so that it doesn't lose all its value, and to be able to hold on to it long enough so that I can, first of all, work until I'm 67 and then enjoy 10 years of my life with my kids. It's completely insane, the world that we live
Mhm.
in and how normal that has become for people.
And your story is so incredible and so inspiring. I got goosebumps when you were talking about how if it weren't for Bitcoin, you wouldn't be able to bring kids into the world. That right there just highlights what Bitcoin represents and why it represents hope and why it's going to just transform the world. The difference between you feeling like you couldn't have kids versus because Bitcoin, now you've brought kids into the world. That's the intangibles of Bitcoin right there. And you nailed it by talking about just having a little bit of breathing space. Just a small amount of breathing space is all we really need in order to be able to see things more clearly and to have any chance of snapping out of this fiat rat race, this fiat hamster wheel. If you don't have any breathing space, you don't have time to reflect. You just have to go and you're going to stay in it. But if you just have a little bit of breathing space, then you can take a step back and use that breathing space to do things that connect you with your natural state, like going for a walk or a hike or meditating or spending time with family. And the more time we can spend in that natural state, the better we're going to be as people, the more tapped into our soul. And then the more tapped in we are to our soul, the more able we're going to be able to figure out what our gifts are and then spread those to the world. So that's what we talk about with Bitcoin being at the head of this consciousness shift because it'll allow us to tap into our soul and then allow us to humanity to thrive and consciousness to upshift. And this is why you and I have started this podcast because it's not about finance, it's not about money, it's about stories that you're telling right here, and that you've got a very powerful message here.
Thank you. Yeah. I've never actually even thought about it in terms of that, but that's the way I feel.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear more about your spiritual journey because that's what Bitcoin, why I have so much respect and why Bitcoin is a huge part of my life is because it deepened my spiritual journey. Kind of like what you said, I was always into self-help and into the spiritual side of things. But once I got into Bitcoin, it just deepened it on a whole nother level. And I'm so thankful for that. So can you talk about exactly how it has deepened your spiritual process?
Yeah, I think probably going back to an earlier time in my life, I was brought up Catholic, and I was probably at times in my life I was probably quite religious, and then came away from that and start to question the universe and question God. And it's this thing of when you grow up, you're just put into this system and you're taught don't question. This is the way
Mm.
things are, and your religion is the right religion. Then as we get older, and when I was a teenager, I started to question things, and I'd disproven God. I was smarter than everybody else, and I'd disproven God. And then eventually, as my life went along, I ended up going down a dark road and battled with things like depression. And that was the first time I had a spiritual experience. Was I went to the doctor, gave me some pills, and says, you could be depressed, take these pills. And straight away I was like, I don't want to take these pills because I don't think they're going to do me any good. And intuitively had this thing that this is not the right thing to do. So I said, is there anything else that I can do that you think might help? And she said, get into nature, do some exercise. So at that moment, I decided to go hiking for the first time, went, climbed up a mountain that was beside my house. And in that moment, I felt so big on top of that mountain, so huge and so powerful. And at the same time, when I looked down and realized I had to go back down there, I felt so small and so insignificant. I had that moment, and that was a great moment in my life, but it wasn't enough to stop me going down the path that I was going down. And I ended up having problems with alcohol and addiction and stuff. And I just rode that till the end of the road. And I, for all the spiritual teachings that I'd read about in the self-help books, I had gotten myself into a position where I can only describe myself as spiritually bankrupt. That's where I was at. And I knew that I had to change my life. And it was almost that's when I had the ego death. I'd become so, such a big ego, and I thought I was the center of the universe. And so I decided that if I was going to improve my life, I had to change everything. So I basically had to kill off the person that I was and start again. And I knew that I would need help for doing that. So I reached out and I asked somebody for help. And these people said to me, if you really want to change your life, you're going to have to hand your thinking and your life over to something bigger than you. You're not the center of the universe. You're the person that got yourself into this mess, taking your own advice. At that moment, I was lucky. I had the gift of desperation and I was willing to do anything. And so I set off down this spiritual path. I had a belief that I'd seen other people around me who had been in a similar situation and their lives had improved and they were now living great lives. And I wanted that. So I put my trust in them, and I put my trust in, I, I had a belief that something out there in the universe would help me because I'd seen it had helped them. And I didn't know what that was. And so I set off on this journey to find out what that was. And that was a struggle for a long time. And eventually I came to rely on something bigger than me. And it happened in terms of I would have difficulties in my life and I would lean on this thing that I now call God, and I would get feedback. If I had problems, the problems get solved. When I tried to figure them out myself, they didn't get solved. When I relied on this higher power, God, things got sorted out in my life. So that's the path I was on. And I had a friend who was on a similar spiritual path, but they were trying to find God through the use of psychedelics. So we were at opposite ends of the spectrum, and we both came together then to have these conversations. And we would sort of wrestle with the same ideas, but we've come to the same conclusions. And so we ended up starting a podcast together, and that sort of widened and broadened my spiritual experience, and it brought to the fore different things like the metaphysical and the work of Carl Jung and the question of where do we go when we die and what happens, is there a life after death, and all of this stuff, all this big stuff. And when we were talking about things on there, the conversation kept coming around to Bitcoin for me. It just was always a wee thing there in my head. And that's when I started thinking of Bitcoin in terms of Bitcoin is this thing that aligns with what we're talking about, because there was this idea that technology was ramping up and becoming more and more advanced. And my friend felt that somewhere along the lines, humanity had taken this road of technology becoming so advanced. And what we should have done was we should have gone the spiritual route, but we
Mm.
didn't. So he felt
Mm.
like there was going to come a time when spirituality was going to have to catch up to technology. And I was thinking Bitcoin is like the perfect technology here. And by using this perfect technology, we can actually bring about this spiritual realm, this more spiritual way of being, more
Mhm.
spiritual way of living. Because when everybody is able to do what they want to do, the things that they love, then that gives people more time. And if everybody's spending their whole day doing things that they love and creating value for people that they love, that's the highest point of consciousness for me. You can't get any better than that as a human
Mhm.
being. And when everybody's doing that, what does that mean for humankind? What does that mean for humanity? What does that mean for the collective consciousness? Obviously, we're going to have to rise to the next thing, you know. I was thinking about Bitcoin as this great technological thing, but also this thing that could bring about greater spiritual enlightenment. So I could marry those two, and I was trying to explain it to him, and he wasn't quite getting it. But that was just a thought, a seed that was planted in my mind, and I started to think more about Bitcoin in terms of it being a spiritual thing. And then again, like I said, the more I looked at the problems in the world and how Bitcoin could fix this, even when God couldn't fix this, because we've had so many people around the world praying, and I know that God is something that has helped me in my own life. So I know that it's something that's real. It's not something that I wonder or I ponder. I know that when I ask God for help or I ask the universe for help, I get it. So why was it that when these masses of people around the world were asking for change, they weren't getting it? Something wasn't working. So even God wasn't working, but I could see that Bitcoin could work. And I still can't marry up why that is, but I truly believe that if everybody adapts Bitcoin into their life, that change will come about. And that is a spiritual thing that even the great spiritual teachers that we know and love weren't able to bring about. And it ended up coming to the point where I kind of joked and I was saying, I was like, I think Bitcoin could be the second coming of Jesus Christ, because Jesus was a hot topic on the podcast that we done. Because Satoshi just gave us this thing, Bitcoin, just came out of nowhere, just gave it to humanity and then disappeared. And no matter what anybody tried to do, it had changed humanity for the better, or it would change humanity for the better. Like, the only way you can describe that is as a spiritual thing. And I think that's what the figure of Jesus was. I don't believe that Jesus was the Son of God. I don't believe that. I think that's a big misinterpretation. But I think Jesus came to show us that we're all man, we're all God, and that the things that he could do, we could also do. And Bitcoin's the only thing that comes close to that for me. So that's it. That's how I got to this way of thinking in a
Man,
roundabout way.
I absolutely love your perspective. There is just something so much deeper to Bitcoin than just finance and just technology. It's incredible technology. It's the most incredible technology that's ever been invented. But even then, there's something even deeper than that, and that's this spiritual aspect to it. That is even more fascinating than its profound technical excellence and innovation. It's this ability to upshift all of humanity, upshift the entire collective consciousness. And that is not being talked about enough. But I love how you're so deeply tapped into it and you speak about it so well. And it basically is a part of this decentralized movement that is necessary for humanity to get to the next level. And you make reference to this idea of decentralized spirituality, where we're shifting away from religion. Religion is institutions or people telling us what to believe or giving us dogma. But there's decentralized spirituality, which means we can tap into our own discernment. We can tap into our own consciousness because we're part of consciousness. So we can feel that on our own as individual nodes. And as individual nodes, we can feel that we're actually all tapped into the same consciousness. So we don't need a religious text or a religion or a person telling us what to think. We can just feel what it's like to connect into that consciousness and connect it into this feeling of oneness, because we're all one. So it's essentially exactly what you're talking about. And that's what Bitcoin is. It shows us that we're all one. We're all nodes that are a part of something bigger.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah. There's so much around us. Reality is so much more than what we can see. And the evidence for that is even in the way that we see the world around us. And if you compare that to how certain animals see, some animals can see in infrared, they can see different light
Mm-hmm.
waves that we can't see. So we know that the world that we think we are living in isn't all that it seems, or maybe it's more. We know that. And then I learned about the double slit experiment. Have you heard about that?
Yeah.
So when I learned about that, I learned that when you what's the word? When you observe, sorry, when you
Mm-hmm.
observe something, it behaves differently than when
Mm-hmm.
it's not being observed. And so that means for me that reality, the physical nature of reality is that when you observe something, it behaves a certain way, and when you're not observing it, it behaves differently. And we've no way to decide what way that is or what's happening outside of what we're viewing. So that means all bets are off. Everything's possible. In that
Hmm.
world, all things are possible. It's such a massive thing to think what could be going on out there. But going back to that podcast that I done previously, there was a lot of ideas that I thought straight away, these are just too crazy. These are too woo woo. Things like the astral plane and the ether and stuff. And through sitting down and listening to people talking about these things, I was like, these things are all possible. They could all be possible. And I heard stories of people that were astral projecting and going into the astral plane and meeting people who were on the other side of the planet and they were astrally projecting and they're having conversations and able to go back, come out of their sleep or whatever and talk about the conversation that they had in this place that neither of them were physically in. It's so strange. So there's a lot of different things that you could look at, and when we say that Bitcoin has the ability to be a spiritual tool to advance humanity, when you compare it to all that other stuff, that massive stuff that could be going on in the ether and the astral plane, it's actually quite a small thing. It seems
Hmm.
so big from where we're at now, but when you compare it to these vast ideas that some people are speaking about and the unlimited possibilities of what humanity and consciousness could actually be, then the fact that Bitcoin is this technology that somebody gave us to improve humanity is quite small. It's really believable in those terms.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the way you're talking about how physical reality is essentially only 0.001% of everything that exists. Quantum mechanics or quantum physics is showing this. It's proving it. This is not a theory. This is what the science is proving. So that means that the rest of the world, this 99.99%, is these energies and frequencies and vibrations. And we have such little understanding of that. And so it's fascinating to think about that. And what I have thought about Bitcoin is that it's almost a bridge between those unseen realms that we're talking about and the physical realm. So it's the first time where you can draw something out of these unseen realms and anchor it into the physical world through the mining process. So it's bridging this informational realm or this non-physical realm with the physical realm. And I think that's what really blows our minds on a level, whether we see it like that or not. That's what makes us realize just how valuable this is, because we're not talking about something from this world. We're talking about something that's drawn out of this a spiritual realm or this informational realm and anchoring it into the physical realm so that it can actually change the way that we go about our actual physical lives because we have access to something from this other realm. It's incredible. And I love that you're talking about this because this is not a conversation I can have with very many
No.
people.
Even the fact that if you get to the point where you can understand that the process of Bitcoin mining, that electricity and energy has to be used to mine
Mhm.
Bitcoin. Once you just get that and you have this digital thing which is intangible, tethered to the physical world, that for me and that alone was like, wow, that's a groundbreaking moment for me. So if you can only understand that, and then yeah,
Yeah.
once you go into that it could be this, it actually goes into the spiritual realm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What people that don't really understand it, they're like, what is Bitcoin backed by? And first of all, what is our money backed by? What is the dollar backed by? A lot of people don't even understand that it's not backed by gold anymore. So it's backed by nothing really. It's backed by
Mm.
trust. So not only is it not backed by gold, but it's backed by nothing. Whereas Bitcoin is backed by energy. And people don't understand, they just think it's digital and they confuse it with other forms of digital money. But this is on a whole nother realm. This is energy. Bitcoin is backed by energy. When people mine it, they have to exert actual energy. So they're inputting energy in order to get Bitcoin. And so it's backed by the fundamental nature of reality. Energy is the fundamental nature of reality. So what better thing to back currency with than the fundamental nature of reality? And yeah, if once you understand that, it takes your understanding to a whole another level.
Yeah, and it's not even that idea is not even like a new idea. I think it was it Henry Ford that spoke about
Yeah.
having this money backed by energy because obviously he's seen the problems with
Mm.
the system that we have currently. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of people think that, oh, Bitcoin is the first digital currency and maybe we need to wait for the next one to come along, similar to the argument people make with MySpace and Facebook. But what people don't understand is that Bitcoin has built on so many years of failed attempts and so many there's so many things that came together for Bitcoin to become what it was. So it's very different than a MySpace versus Facebook. It's Bitcoin stands alone, and there will never be anything like it again. You can't really perfect it. The idea
Yeah.
has already been released. You can't really release it again.
No. And even going back to those first, like the cypherpunk movement and the idea that privacy was something that should be valued. It predates like Bitcoin, but that's a core element, I think, is this idea that people should have the right to privacy. That's a
Mhm.
core idea behind what would later become Bitcoin, I think. And I like to think about it in terms of that as well, because even going into things like Nostr and how we can move away from this centralized internet and centralized social media. And Nostr actually gives us the chance to build social networks, which is what social media was supposed to be before it became corrupted by the fiat mentality. And there is a place where we're able to value privacy and hold on to our privacy. And a lot of people maybe don't quite understand why that's important. And a conversation that I've had recently is that I don't, my friend said to me, I don't have any reason not to trust X because they haven't
Mhm.
done anything yet. And my viewpoint as a Bitcoiner is, but you still have to trust that they won't do something in the future. Whereas with me, I don't put my trust in anything anymore. I don't have to trust anything. I don't have to trust a human. I don't have to trust a system because I can verify things now. And if I have the option to verify something, I'm going to verify it rather than trust it. So that again brings a great sense of peace to people because you don't have to put your trust in anything, any system or
Mhm.
any person. And I think Nostr was one of the things that made me realize that privacy is something that we can have. And if you, I don't know if you've ever heard about Alan Watts and him talking about
Mhm.
the future. So have you heard of Alan Watts before?
Yeah, yeah, I listen to
Yeah.
his stuff
So
on YouTube all the time.
yeah, he used to talk me to sleep.
Yeah.
I used to love listening to him. But he talked about in one of his seminars, one of his talks about he's basically describing an iPhone and he's describing this technology where we'll be able to speak with people on a video call. And
Mhm.
this is in the 50s. And he talked about this idea that there might be a world where we can all see inside each other's heads and we can all see each other's secrets. But it won't be so bad because if I can see all of your secrets and all of your darkness and your whatever things you don't want people to know about you, and you can see mine, then it's okay because we're all equal and it's fine. But what happens in a world where the overlords have
Mhm.
access to that, but we
Mhm.
can't see? Somehow they're able to block us from seeing their innermost thoughts.
Mhm.
And that is a really scary world. And
Mhm.
I think that what he was describing is actually what is coming about. If we don't
Mhm.
already have it, it's what's coming, especially with the things like the central bank digital currency and this clampdown on people's use of the internet and social media. And now what we see in the UK especially is this clampdown on free speech. And for
Mhm.
me, Bitcoin is about all of those things too. It's about privacy and it's about free speech and then obviously about self-sovereignty. Because if you don't have privacy, then what do you have? You don't have anything. And basically those are the key elements of freedom. And this, I suppose, for me is about freedom. It's we said before that it's not about money. It's not, it's so far detached from money. It's about
Mhm.
privacy for me and my family and freedom. That's what it is. It's a freedom technology. A lot of people call it a freedom technology, and that's what it is. And this idea was born long before Satoshi and the release of the white paper. So it's something that's been built on. It's been something that's been built on and saved and worked out. And it's the result of this hard work and these strong ideas from these people.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much for all of these insights, for taking time to come on and share your story and for being so personal about some of the things you shared. Really appreciate it. There's some things you mentioned that I had never really thought about, and I'm gonna ponder those things. So thank you.
No problem.
And anything else that you wanted to add before we close this out?
I would just say to anybody that's intrigued about Bitcoin and hasn't maybe got any Bitcoin yet, if you don't want to invest your money into Bitcoin, just write down the price of it maybe and keep track of that for a year or two. And that's the way you can find out whether you would have increased your purchasing power or not. And read a book, read a Bitcoin book, listen to podcasts, and start to look at this thing. Get inquisitive about it because it's something that will change your life and it will change your family's lives and it could make your community better. And if that's all it does, if it doesn't change the world, if it just makes your life a little bit better and gives you that little bit of breathing space to think about what is that thing that I want to do with my life? Who is that person that I want to be? Then that's all it needs to be. It doesn't need to change the world, it just needs to change your life, and that's what it will do.
Yeah, there's never been any person that's put in a decent amount of research into Bitcoin that continues to be a skeptic or continues to think it's bad or hasn't been changed in a positive way.
Yeah,
So
that's,
if you just put in a little bit of time, we promise your life is going to be better and potentially significantly better. So if you can just take a little bit of time to, instead of watching TV for a few days, just look into Bitcoin, it's going to have massive dividends in your life.
yeah.
Yeah.
And on top of that, I don't know anybody that hasn't had to at some point say, I was wrong. Because
Hmm.
I came to trying to prove that it was a scam, and I
Hmm.
had built so much of of who I was on this old financial system. And it got to the point where I had to say, I can't prove that Bitcoin is a scam. And actually, I think it is all the things that these people are saying it is. And I was wrong. And to
Hmm.
go back to square one, go back to zero and start to learn. So Bitcoin humbled me. And don't be afraid to let Bitcoin humble you. Just be inquisitive about it. Yeah. Be curious.
Yeah. Thanks again so much for coming on the show. We'll definitely have to do this again sometime.
Yeah, no problem. Look
Yeah.
forward to it.
All right. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, Dr. Satoshi.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
I hope that you enjoyed this episode of The Signal. In a world drowning in noise, signal is everything. Most people are overwhelmed, distracted, and deceived, not because they lack intelligence, but because they've lost the ability to discern what truly matters. But signal cuts through the noise. And Bitcoin is pure signal. It doesn't promise, it doesn't lie, it doesn't bend to opinion or propaganda. It just is. And as the world descends into even more chaos, distraction, and distortion, your ability to identify signal, to recognize what's real, true, and timeless will be one of your greatest assets. So stay sharp, stay sovereign, stay tuned, because here on The Signal, we don't follow trends, we follow truth. I'm Dr. Satoshi, and in a world of noise, we are the signal.